Today, we thread the needle of the 1981 spy movie, Eye of the Needle. We just did a decoding session of Operation Bodyguard, so we thought we'd dive into this World War II spy movie, which centers on the exact same issues that we covered in the real-world operations. The invasion of Normandy and keeping the invasion location and timing secret to the Germans, and the plots and plans that went into doing that. Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Get out your stilettos, your sewing kits, and let's get going. All right. And a special thanks to one of our local listeners who we see in our pub once in a while who suggested that we do Eye of a Needle. We'll use his cover name here since that's what he wants. So thanks to Admiral Boom.
Admiral Boom, that's a good name for him.
The Admiral knows a lot of stuff.
All right, now, we also offer this episode as a tribute to Donald Sutherland, who died last month. We think this is one of his best spy roles, and not surprisingly, he plays the character of Faber very well. Now, Dan, as you said, we talked about Deceit in our last episode on Operation Bodyguard and Operation Fortitude as part of it. And Deceit is key in war and espionage. And as you know, I just got back from holiday in the Caribbean, which used to be a hotbed for pirates in the 1700s and 1800s. Really, pirates were their own organization of liars, deceivers, plunderers, spying on virtually any foreign ship that might hold treasures. In fact, when we were there, it was raining so hard you couldn't see from the boat more than maybe 50 yards in front of you. And you talk about a spooky little deception setup that was right there, right? So Deceit was a big part of the Pirates game, much like Deceit is a big part of this movie and real life as we're covering it today.
It does play a big role, Tom. And when we were standing on Omaha Beach in Normandy a few years back, and you saw the amount of land that they had to take to get to the Germans, it wasn't much. And the price they had to pay for getting that land, you realize how much worse it would have been had this deception by the Allies not worked. All right, let's talk about that right now. In Eye of the Needle, a part of the diversion and deception of the invasion was the part the Ghost Army played in the invasion. That's the part of the army that focused on causing confusion in the enemy's mind, especially in the area of troop and equipment movement. We spoke with Rick Beyer in that Operation Bodyguard episode about this. He wrote the book, The Ghost Army of World War II, about how this top secret unit deceived the enemy with inflatable tanks, sound effects, and other audacious fakery. Now, Eye of the Needle deals with a German spy, Faber, who you mentioned, who discovers some of this diversion. In particular, how fake wooden planes and other equipment and troops were being used to fool the Germans into thinking the invasion would take place at some location other than Normandy, like
Pas-de-Calais. Now that's, what's really cool about this is a real world operation. And we're going to see the remnants of it in this movie and the results of what they did there. So it's pretty cool to tie that back together.
Yeah, so let's divert ourselves back to this movie. Eye of the Needle is based on Ken Follett's 1978 novel of the same name and is directed by Richard Marquand and was released in 1981. It's a World War II espionage thriller starring Donald Sutherland as Henry Faber, a German spy known as the Needle, who discovers critical, real, and vital information about the Allied European D-Day invasion plans. So, Faber's mission now is to make certain that this intelligence that he's gathered gets delivered to Hitler so that the Germans know exactly what to do to stave off this invasion. The movie starts with Faber portrayed as this charming, friendly British guy, and within a few minutes, there's a bloody murder. The entire movie is a chase for this man before he can get this information to Hitler. So yes, we have a chase, a long one, the entire movie. We get trains, cars, U-boats, broadcast messages, Scotland Yard, the military, love scenes. We get it all.
And of course, there is that train, Dan. I mean, this is a spy movie. Oh, yeah. Got to have a train in a spy movie. And I also loved how adept Faber was at escaping tight situations. He could read people really well. He could read a situation he was in really well. And he used that to his advantage. And he also uses a portable Morse code machine, which I really liked. It's the form of communication we saw in the Indian spy movie Razzi, and we see it in many spy movies because they were used a lot in espionage. And with it being portable, it would be harder for the opposition to track down where the signals were coming from.
Yeah, yeah. And he was always calm. Calm face, no nervousness, just in control and thinking. All right. The chase eventually leads Faber to an isolated Scottish island called Storm Island, where he encounters a young woman, Lucy, played by Kate Nelligan, and her legless husband, as he calls himself. We see them in the beginning getting married and crashing on their wedding day, and that's how he loses both legs. He was going to be an RAF pilot.
Now, Lucy and David have a child called Joe. When was he conceived? When they stopped for champagne and fun after the wedding, before the crash, is that when Joe was conceived? Or was it before, when Lucy told her mother she already knew about what happens on a wedding night? They don't really make that clear, because they say it was, he's incapacitated that day, and they say Joe's 4 years
Yeah.
old. So,
Yeah, but I think later on she says he could still do
Perform,
stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, I was wondering that myself, and then I thought, yeah, I'm gonna let that go.
Sorry.
All right, was The Eye of a Needle a smashing success when it was released? Hey, worldwide box office numbers were 17.5 million, and that was really all domestic since it had limited distribution. Production costs I couldn't find. So was it a success? Probably. It got pretty good
Yeah, I mean,
reviews.
on Rotten Tomato, it's got an 85% tomato meter reading, which is the critics,
That's good.
and 75% audience score. So this was a well-received movie.
Yeah. And this is not a spy movie like most spy movies. It's, we've got 260 something episodes out now on spy movies and all that. This is not the same kind of spy movie that we're
Really.
used to. It's more of a spy chase thriller with espionage at the root of the chase. The movie uniquely blends all of these elements of this romantic drama, as we mentioned with Lucy, that's going to become something, that relationship, and it sets it apart from the typical genre that we are normally used to. Richard Marquand's direction is noted for its focus on character development and psychological tension, rather than relying heavily on action sequences, which of course was a distinct approach for spy thrillers at that time.
Now,
So,
George Lucas was impressed by this movie, and so impressed that he hired the director to helm the 1983's movie Return of the Jedi, mostly because Marquand finished on time and within budget. And he's also,
yeah, it's
which
important.
is important, right? And so Marquand directed other fabulous movies as well. He had Jagged Edge in 1985 and Nowhere to Run in 1993.
Yeah. All right, let's dive in. To start with, we will go over some of the plot and highlight some of the positives of this movie. Overall, hey, it's worth a watch. It's an hour and 52 minutes long. Worth the time.
We'll also talk a little bit about some of the criticisms it's gotten as well.
Of course, there's criticisms.
It's a movie.
What else would critics do? I think the opening shots during the credits were really, really well done. The train station in particular looks so real, so authentic. Troops are being moved by train, and you really get an immediate feel that this is World War II. The atmosphere created is just.
Oh, I agree with you totally. I mean, at first when I saw this and it was opening up, I thought we were seeing stock footage of the real
Hey,
thing,
there
right?
you go.
And so they really did this really well. Plus, as we said, we meet Henry Faber early on, and he appears to be a Brit. Seems very friendly, very loyal, but we learn shortly thereafter who he's really loyal to.
Yeah, we get a different feel for him after his first stiletto murder. That's his weapon of choice. And of course, why he's called the Needle.
Yeah, now they
by the
actually never
Germans.
say in the movie how he got that nickname. You know the needle was the stiletto. And I also wonder if this influenced the name of Aerys' sword in Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, the sword was called Needle, supposedly because she was needled or teased by some kids while young. It was small, really pointy. But I really have to think that Faber's nickname here was an influence on that.
Yeah, definitely the needle was the stiletto, and we'll explore that a little bit more later. All right, we get a sense of what he is all about quickly. And we know he got orders to photograph the troop movements and buildup so that Germany can have the right number of troops in the right place to defend the European coast against the impending Allied invasion. Will it be Normandy, Calais, Norway, the Balkans?
So we know that in real operations like Operation Bodyguard and Operation Fortitude, there were many double agents planting inaccurate information on the Germans to confuse them. So when we spoke with Rick Beyer, the author of The Ghost Army of World War II, we know that this ghost army actually built inflatable tanks and wooden aircraft to stage on the ground to make it look like the real thing to any German flying by. I mean, it even had tents that weren't occupied because the real tanks and planes and troops were elsewhere. It was all a deception.
Yeah, that's the whole basis of the movie. In real life, though, Rick was saying that this whole Ghost Army thing was deployed after the invasion of Normandy. So they're taking some liberties in this movie to tie this in with what they want to do with this German spy.
The Ghost Army was a U.S. deployment, but that the Brits used some of this. They didn't have the inflatable tanks, but they used some of this whole thing about fake airplanes and stuff as part of the deception. The concept of the deception wasn't exclusive to Ghost Army. It was just which side was doing what at which point in the operation, and this was before the deployment.
In reality, it has nothing to do with what they're trying to do in this movie. I mean, unless he stumbled upon the accidental field where they were practicing, which may have been. When Faber is assigned to find out what's going on with the troop and armament movements and staging, he discovers a large airfield full of planes, fake planes. He photographs this all, and now the chase is on. He needs to get the photos.
When we say fake planes, he was standing next to one and didn't know it was fake until he bumped into the propeller.
Yeah, he got to the underbelly of it. It's all wood and the propeller falls
But it was
off.
close
Yeah.
enough. He was
He's
standing
like,
right there and didn't know he
"What?"
was looking at a fake plane.
They did a damn good job on that stuff. It looked good. So he had to photograph all this stuff, and now the chase is on, right? He has to get these photos to Hitler because Hitler trusted him for some reason. We don't know why in this movie. Too bad England did not turn this German spy into a double agent like they did in real life with so many of these.
And so this whole thing of this trying to get the Germans to believe the patent was going to be going to Pas de Calais and using these fake airplanes and a fake field like this to help as part of the deception. It's one of the reasons we're decoding this movie right after we did the Operation Bodyguard episode. This stuff was real, and in this movie, it lets us see it in action. And yes, Faber discovered it, but will he ever get a chance to let Hitler know? It's intriguing stuff.
It is. The unfolding of the story reveals the key players quickly. Donald Sutherland as the Needle. Well, he's Faber. I think he's as scary as Max von Sydow as the assassin in 3 Days of the Condor, which we just did an episode on a couple of weeks back.
Yeah, see, now I would actually say, yes, Faber gets to be very, very scary, but there are some non-scary parts in his role, where von Sydow's character, Jobert, was cold and scary throughout 3 Days of the Condor. So, yeah, when he was scary, he was that scary, but I think throughout it's not just he's playing this really intense, scary guy.
Yeah, you get some moments in this movie, The Eye of the Needle, where you think he's not this scary guy. But for me, I always thought I never trusted him in anything he was doing in the movie. So, like, nah. Yeah. We see a bit of the 39 steps in here, too, I think, with the love interest. But here, it is far more detailed. There are some semi-nude shots in this movie.
I had the same thought about the love interest in the 39 steps. I mean, it's different here because... Okay. In the 39 steps, Crofter thinks that Hannah had an affair with his wife, but the act never really did occur. But here, Faber and Lucy do hook up more than once. And I think these scenes are probably the reason for the R rating. Because there is some nudity here. This is definitely not, I mean, it's R, it's not PG-13. It's not designed to be for kids.
Now, Kate Nelligan as Lucy Rose, the woman who marries David Rose, played by Christopher Cazenove, is absolutely superb throughout this movie. First, she is gorgeous, and she uses all of her body to act on the highest level possible. Her poignant predicament, now married to a husband who lost his legs, and they have a 4 or 5 year old child, Joe. Wow, she plays it off to perfection. Stare at her face. I mean, for lots of reasons, but for one, she can act with her face, her hands, her body, and she is just believable throughout, all the way to the end.
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, Christopher Cazenove as David Rose, the would-be RAF pilot who lost his legs. He plays his character well, too. And you get a feel for his character, and you can almost predict what he's going to do in these situations. So that's really good writing.
Yeah, now another thing I liked here, I thought the shots of Storm Island and the severe storms were very well done. I mean,
Yeah.
it's bleak, stark, isolated, and was never a pleasant environment. I mean, for any reason on this island, which was really the island of Mule.
Yeah.
Now, as you mentioned, this isn't a story like our usual spy stories. We have a lot of the elements in it, but it's not really an action movie,
No.
not a gadget movie, and the espionage is done rather quickly, and then it becomes a race, an adventure movie, if you will.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
plenty of tense moments, and you'll be gasping now and then at just what happened on the screen and how quickly it happened.
Yeah.
So it is successful in creating an atmosphere that makes you want to watch, and it's a spy story with a different twist, which is something we like.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've gone over some highlights of this, and so let's go ahead and talk about some of the reasons why you should be watching The Eye of the Needle.
First, we want to give a shout out to some of our listeners who have recently given us feedback on our recent podcast episodes. So, a big shout out to Jim Phelps, Carl Epler, Mark Geiger, and Pietro Rossi. Thank you all. We love hearing your feedback, so keep it coming. All right, we have 10 reasons why you should watch Eye of the Needle. Number 1, Donald Sutherland. His performance is fabulous. He delivers a compelling portrayal of Henry Faber, the ruthless German spy, bringing depth and nuance to the character. And Roger Ebert, who was a great film critic, loved him in this movie. We loved how focused and ruthless he is. Perhaps this is how spies must be, but Donald Sutherland's performance here just could not be better. Who else might have played this role as well? Hey, when that's a hard question to answer, then you know this performance was over the top.
Yeah, because the one thing I like about it is it's not a Bond performance, right? He's
No.
not trying to be James Bond.
No.
Totally different character.
Yeah. Sutherland had the look, the feel, the attitude, the body movement, the face and determination. Bond-like in that he must complete his mission no matter what, was focused like that. And his on-screen chemistry with Kate Nelligan was outstanding.
Yeah,
Superb.
absolutely. It just
Yeah.
was a different feel from the character's perspective.
Yeah.
Now, he has played some similar evil roles in some of his earlier movies.
Yeah.
You have movies like The Eagle Has Landed from 1976 or
Mhm.
The Disappearance in 1977. But in general, he's a great actor. He was great in The Dirty Dozen, MASH, Clute, Animal House, and many others.
Yeah, in fact, his name here is Faber, as we said. As you just mentioned, Tom, he was in Animal House, where he played a professor at a college called Faber, and that was released 3 years before Eye of the Needle. There you go. From the first we see him on the screen, friendly, charming, to how we see him in every scene, this vicious German spy, he is just spectacular. His face is always calm and cool, as he is all the time. He is confident and plays it off well. He has some good lines, but he did what he had to do, which is one of the lines that we're going to talk about. He was outstanding. From engaging with the British in a friendly manner, to his landlady, to discovering the phony planes, to his time on Storm Island, simply perfect. He's called the Needle, as we said, because he kills people with his stiletto. The stiletto being the needle. All right, enough said about that. We'll look at the supporting cast, too, including Kate Nelligan, in a minute. Wow.
And number 2, reason why you should watch this, is the engaging espionage plot.
Yeah.
The movie's plot is centered around espionage and World War II intrigue. It keeps the viewers on the edge of their seats as Faber tries to deliver crucial information to Germany. Now, it is based somewhat on true happenings in World War II. Faber wasn't real, but the whole concept of these fake planes and trying to deceive Hitler and Operation Fortitude to make them think that we were coming in and Pas de Calais, that stuff's real.
Yep.
So we mentioned some of this in our last episode on Operation Bodyguard, but here is the movie application of what was happening in real life. The success of defeating Hitler hinged upon a successful invasion of Europe by the Allies, and the deception that went into pulling off the Normandy invasion is front and center in The Eye of the Needle.
Yeah, I mean, of course, history buffs know the end game, and that the Normandy invasion was costly but successful. But Eye of the Needle reveals some of the espionage that was pervasive throughout the war. And this is just one story about it. So it is engaging. All right, the third reason is the atmospheric setting. The isolated Scottish island setting enhances the film's suspense and mood, providing a stark and captivating background for the unfolding of this story. They filmed in London, Surrey, Hampshire, and a lot in Scotland on the Isle of Mule. They used Connell Bridge, Blackbush Airport in Yateley, and more. So the atmosphere they created and the shots they took and the locations were all fantastic and enhanced the story. So all of this added to the depth of the movie in building the right atmosphere that draws us into the scenes, which is always good. When you could feel the scene, it is a success, and you can many times in this movie.
Oh, absolutely. And I love how they used the Isle of Mule and the way they built the set on it.
Yeah.
Because in reality, there are over 2,600 people who live on this island.
Mhm.
But by the way the story is written and the way they shot it, David, Joe, Lucy, and Tom are the only people on the island.
Yeah. She even says they have a boat come once a week for supplies or
So
whatever.
it's just
Yeah.
total isolation here.
Yeah.
And it just brings out the way they've done this, that isolation is important to the plot. Because if it wasn't so isolated and Lucy had other friends, would she have given in to Faber? I mean, also with this isolation, there's no real place to run.
No
I mean,
place to
everything
go.
has, it's kind of like an Agatha Christie novel. Everything
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
take place on this island. And it's a magnificent choice for the location for the second half of this movie, which pretty much the whole second half is
Yeah.
done
Yes.
on this island.
Yeah. All right, let's look at the fourth reason, character development. We were talking a little bit about this. Almost every movie we cover has one main critique, character development or lack thereof. Eye of the Needle is different. I do not think anyone can critique this movie about character development. It focuses to unveil the character development as we watch, and it takes a very deliberate pace, allowing for rich character development, particularly in the complex and suspenseful relationship between Faber and Lucy. Roger Ebert loved this part as well, and we see true character development in Eye of the Needle. This is indeed lacking in most other movies. In 1 hour and 52 minutes, the screenwriters, director, and actors did a superb job in building the main characters in this movie. Bravo. Bravo, I say. Now, you are not going to find a ton of action sequences here, as we said, but this was the plan.
Yes, I agree with you. And there's another character that I thought they developed very well. It's a fairly small role, but the character of Billy Parkin.
Yeah.
And we see Billy years apart. And so what we see of him at the beginning, he ages a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit in this movie before we see him again. And his opinion of Faber changes as he ages because he finds out who Faber really is. And I thought Philip Martin Brown played that role very well, that the character is well developed. And there's not a lot of screen time for this character, but you get what you need out of the character development of Billy. So I thought that's one I just want to call out.
Yeah. This was really well done. All right, let's look at the fifth reason. It was tense and suspenseful. That said, the movie does a solid job of maintaining tension throughout and builds up to an engaging climax that keeps viewers watching, guessing, and wondering what will happen next. That is excellent.
It really is. And I think we should probably make a note here of the musical score. I mean,
Yeah.
the score was composed by Miklos Rosa, and he's a
Mhm.
renowned composer for his work on such classic films as Ben-Hur and Spellbound. And his contribution to Eye of the Needle, it added this layer of dramatic intensity to the movie. It kept the intensity in the forefront throughout the movie, and that's really important. The music really helps with keeping that tension because this is a tense movie, just keeping it front and center for you.
Yeah. It enhances the story for sure. All right, let's look at the sixth reason, the strong supporting cast. It was good. I mean, besides Donald Sutherland, of course, the rest of the cast was well cast. Kate Nelligan's performance as Lucy adds emotional interest and depth to the storyline, making us wonder what she will do, how she will react, what will her end game be. She has a poignant role that demands many different types of the same character to be revealed. That's hard to do. She is married to David, who lost his legs, and she tries to love him, but is unhappy. And so the needle is part of this love triangle. Well played. She's gorgeous, absolutely stunning in this movie, She plays her role with her entire body, literally. There are a few nude scenes, as he said, but her face is her real strength because she is playing a tough role, and her face defines each scene she is in. She is that good. Watch her lips, her eyes, her hands. A favorite in this movie.
There's even a scene where she's in the bathtub with Joe, and there's not a lot of places she can move or do anything, but she does that very well. And there
Yes.
you see her in the role of the mother, and very briefly after that, as a mother kind of caught in an awkward situation.
Yeah.
So Kate has been in a lot of other movies too. She's been in The Cider House Rules, A Wrinkle in Time, and here she's simply outstanding and is Lucy Rose.
She is.
Now, she also starred with Donald Sutherland a few years earlier in 1977 in the television movie Bethune.
Yeah. A lot of the other characters, and there's a ton of them in this movie, they're not developed all that much, but you don't need them developed all that much. I like the lighthouse keeper, played by Alex McCrindle, and his drunken role. Those pursuing Faber also were solid enough. Fantastic casting.
Yep, I agree with you. Now, there's two characters here that I want to call out
Okay.
that had small roles here, but really helped develop things nice. And the first one is Lucy's mother, right?
Yeah, she was good.
Lucy's mother was played by Faith Brooke. I mean, this is a small role, and I think she's only in like 2 or 3 scenes, but her
Mhm.
character is one of a caring mother, worried about her daughter as she gets married, and then now that she's living on this island, this character brings in some pretty good humor as well. I mean, for instance, in her last scene, she has a short conversation with the lighthouse keeper slash shepherd, Tom.
Yeah.
So what Tom did was he gave Lucy's mother some sheep to take back to London because of the rationing.
Yeah.
And so this was a sort of helpfulness that people showed during the war that we don't see all of the time. And the mother reacting to taking these 2 sheep back to London, it just
Yeah.
struck me as there was a bit of humor to it.
Yeah.
If you were living it at the time, there might not have been humor, but
Right.
for me now, it did. And the other role that I want to call out is Inspector Godleman. And
Oh, yeah.
anytime I can see Oscar-nominated actor Ian Bannon in a movie, it's likely to be a good movie. My favorite role of his is Jackie O'Shea in Waking Ned Devine. Here in Eye of the Needle, he's the guy trying to track down Faber. And he always seems to be one step behind, and he gets hassled by his management for it.
Yeah.
So
Constantly.
it's not a huge role, but it's I think an impactful one.
Yeah. Now, one of our friends, Derek Lyons, who was in 4 James Bond movies, Star Wars and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, he was a soldier on the train in this movie. So that was pretty cool.
You gotta like
So,
that.
way to go, Derek. All right. All right, let's look at the 7th reason, the historical context. We talked about that. A little bit spies in World War II. They go hand in hand. The action is set during World War II, is based on real events, and the deception and spying and intrigue that unfolded on both sides, the Allies, France, Great Britain, and the United States, the Soviet Union, and to a lesser extent China, and the Axis armies, Germany, Italy, and Japan. This movie gives us a glimpse into this era of espionage and all of the activities that took place around this invasion and the lengths to which these spies would go through to complete their missions, kind of like Bond. Most of what we see in spy movies came out of history to one degree or another.
It's true.
Yeah. There's one cool scene when they are picking up Sergeant Billy Parkin from the military base airport. You mentioned Billy.
I had mentioned Billy earlier.
A nice role. He was being brought in to try to identify Henry Faber in old German military school class photos. After you see the large plane on the screen, when the car is driving up, in the background on the left is a small plane. And in real life, it's called a spy taxi and was used during World War II. It was a small plane that required little takeoff and landing room. It was a Westland Lysander, and they say there are only 2 left that exist now in the world that can still fly. So
That's
this
cool.
was kind of cool that that is a prop. I say props to the prop people because
Jeez.
that was a great prop.
Another bad Dan pun. There's another nice prop in Tom, the lighthouse keeper slash shepherd's cabin on Storm Island. And we see it a couple times when Lucy is scrambling around towards the end of it. There's an image on the wall with the words, "Abide with me." And this comes from the lyrics of a hymn written by Henry Francis Lyte, a Scottish Anglican cleric. And so how cool is that?
Yeah, that is cool.
And this thing is a plea for God to stay with the speaker throughout his life and in death, which has additional meaning in the context of this movie.
Yeah,
So this is a great piece to have on the wall. Abide.
it is.
Indeed.
It's fantastic. That kind of stuff makes the movie, right? There's a great piece of intelligence. Now, there are historical inaccuracies in the movie, too, that we won't spend much time detailing. For example, the U-boat that appears in the movie, we said that there was one. It's U-53. When you look up U-53, it was a U-boat, but it was sunk in 1940. And the movie is taking place in 1944. And the U-boat, well, it didn't look like a U-boat to me, mostly because it was an English sub, a British S-class. So there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a bunch of these kind of inconsistencies,
Yeah,
and many of them are vehicles that shouldn't have been there
yeah,
because they weren't created until after this place and
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But someone who isn't a history buff or wasn't around back during World War II, you're not likely to catch most of those. You have to have a willing suspension of disbelief, and sometimes the vehicles might not have been around then. Just deal with it.
Yeah, right. All right, let's get to one of our favorite points, moral ambiguity. I love this because you can look at this in every movie because every spy movie has this concept in it that has to be dealt with. So number 8 is moral ambiguity. What are the morals of the story, of the individuals in the story, and will they change? Eye of the Needle is right in there, exploring common themes of loyalty, betrayal, and much like we saw in the movie Five Fingers that we have an episode on, the characters are often presented with morally ambiguous choices that add depth, doubt, and complexity to the narrative. And in Eye of the Needle, we are constantly doubting and wondering. So again, I love to go back to Mathis in Quantum of Solace, Bond's great buddy, as it turns out. He had the best line that sums up stuff that we can use in every spy movie when he says this.
But I guess when one's young, it seems very easy to distinguish between right and wrong. But as one gets older, it becomes more difficult. The villains and the heroes get all mixed up.
I mean, I love that line from Mathis.
It is a
And
good one.
We've quoted it a few times because it really neatly and accurately sums up the espionage world. What you do for your country seems right, while your enemy thinks you are the villain and what they are doing is right. This is great. This is the source of this moral ambiguity talk that permeates most, if not all, spy movies. But when it's played off well in a movie, and some don't play it off well, when it does, it adds dimension to the story. And here it is done very well.
I agree with you there. And you're talking about the moral ambiguity of the whole spy. And I'm doing this for Germany because it's the right thing for my country, which means it's the wrong thing for your country, right? But I think there's also another set of moral ambiguity that comes out in this movie, and that's the relationship between Lucy and Faber.
Yeah,
We
that's a
have a
good one.
married woman sleeping with a guy she just met, and it happens in the house she shares with her husband. I mean,
Yeah.
now, Lucy is in an awful place in life right now. Her
Yeah, she
husband is
is.
verbally abusive to her. He won't go near her in bed because he's so hung up on his physical deformities after the car crash. So one can assume that it's
He's
been
angry.
so one can assume that it's been 4 years for Lucy since she's been with a man. Then this Faber guy just drops in out of the ocean, an opportunity presents itself. Faber appears to be ashamed after the act, right? At least the first one. But Lucy was fine with it. And for her, it was some comfort with her living in a very uncomfortable, lonely situation. So you want to talk about moral ambiguity? This one really has it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one moment where you see the needle, Faber, not vicious, because in the morning after they had their tryst, he asks her that morning if she despises him.
Good morning.
You don't despise me, do you?
No. How could I?
Oh, you could. I could. It can't happen again. It won't.
Do you regret it?
So So that kind of sums up the only part I think that we see of Faber that you might think, okay, he has some heart.
There's a human there somewhere.
And there's not a stiletto in it. Uh, and I think you get the feeling that he is not going to harm her. You kind of get that feeling from there, but you still don't know what's going to happen. You don't know because he's devious.
He's a spy.
Yeah. You know, when a movie's called something, I always wonder why it's called that. Why is this called Eye of a Needle? We know the stiletto is his needle and that's his weapon of choice and so on. If you look back to biblical times, the gateways into Jerusalem were always narrow because it's easier to defend. And so heavily loaded camels would have to unpack before passing through the gate. Hence the biblical saying, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. This is a theory, of course, that's why that's called that way.
Well, I'll give you another theory here, Dan, because the eye of the needle is a reference to the eye of the stiletto blade that Faber uses. It's the opposite tip of the blade, much like the eye of a sewing needle is on the opposite side from the point. And I actually think it's probably an amalgamation of a couple different things, including what you were talking about, that it's hard to get to heaven through the eye of a needle.
But I'm always want to think about what it means. So are we to think that there is a moral in this movie? One side is right and the other is wrong. Well, we know what side we're rooting for in this movie. At least most of us are on the same side. So what is this message? The needle must shed his evilness to have a chance at redemption. Redemption to us in the movie. Is he trying to redeem himself to us? And that is totally impossible given what he does. He does near the end say,
The war's come down to the two of us. Do you know that? I did what I had to do. It cannot be undone. I'm sorry.
so what does he mean by that? It cannot be undone. Was he feeling any remorse there? Is it good enough for him to say that and for us to forgive him? I'm going to say no. But I'm wondering if for a second he had any regrets there. I don't think he did, though, actually. I think he's like, it can't be undone. In other words, hey, I had to do it. I did it. That's that.
We have heard this too many times during and after World War II, at the Nuremberg trials and more. I was only following orders.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes the orders are immoral. Do you follow through on those? And that's another underlying theme in this movie. Morality versus immorality. Good versus evil. Just wow.
Yeah.
So the ninth reason that we like this movie is it's visually impressive. I mean,
Yeah,
the
it is.
cinematography captures the bleak and rugged beauty of the Scottish landscape, and it really enhances the film's atmospheric tension. I mean, it's
does.
all good. The train scenes at the beginning are outstanding.
Yeah.
The house sets and the lighthouse set and the cabin on Storm Island.
Loved
Just
it.
fantastic.
Yeah.
No,
Good stuff.
and the lighting and the shadow play through the movie, especially on Faber's face towards the end. I mean, it's just spectacular.
It is spectacular. Even the phony plywood airplanes used in the film to depict the Allied deception strategy were historically accurate, showcasing the lengths to which filmmakers went to ensure authenticity in depicting this particular World War II strategy.
It looked so cool.
It did.
Yeah. And now
It did.
we talk about the visual impressiveness. Cinematographer Alan Hume captures the essence that gets presented to us, right? Bond fans know him from the 1981 James Bond movie, For Your Eyes Only. He also did Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Life Force, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and many other spectacular movies. He was a really, really good
He
cinematographer.
knows what he's doing. Yeah. Let's look at the 10th and last reason why you should watch this movie, the adaptation of the best-selling novel. And that is hard to do, always a challenge, and many times a critique, adapting a novel and bringing it to the big screen. Wow. I've not read the original book here, But the fans of Ken Follett's work appreciate this adaptation, which stays true to the spirit of the original novel while providing a cinematic experience that enhances the story. There are some elements in it that are not the same as in the book, but the fundamentals are there. Elements are changed, but the theme is the same. The screenplay was written by Stanley Mann. I mean, it's just first rate.
Absolutely, yeah.
The dialogue in this movie is something you have to pay attention to. It's crisp, it's tight, it flows naturally. Stanley Mann has done a particularly good job here, as he has done in Conan the Destroyer, The Collector, Firestarter. He's done a lot of stuff. So fantastic, good stuff here. Eye of the Needle, hey, it's captivating to watch for fans of suspenseful thrillers and historical dramas and spy fans. Though this movie is not based on a real character in history, like the Needle. He is pure fiction in this movie.
But I love the way they do tying the fiction in with real stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the positives of the movie. The film has received some mixed reviews. So let's go ahead and look at some of the critiques of the movie. I mean, overall, it's been praised by many, but there are some criticisms.
A few.
All right, so the first critique we'll talk about is pacing issues. And some viewers...
pacing issues again.
Yeah, shocking, right? Every movie seems to have that as a critique. Some viewers find the film's deliberate pacing slow, particularly in the first half, which might not appeal to those expecting a fast-paced thriller. We said when we talked about character development that this was a deliberate attempt to actually develop the characters on screen so we can enjoy that. The flip side of doing that, though, is people sometimes complain about the pacing then.
Yeah.
And the first half is slow, and it's interesting because they cut back and forth between what's happening to Lucy and David and what's happening to Faber when their lives haven't crossed yet. And so it goes back and forth, which it can add to the slowness, but it builds and develops the characters. So if you choose to do character development within the movie, you kind of have to have it that way.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an issue for if you want nonstop action and on-screen thrills.
Yeah,
Here, you just get espionage and character development.
Yeah, but I think the character development here is fantastic and really works within the movie.
Right. So then the second of the critiques, if you will, is that this is a predictable plot. Okay, duh. This is about somebody who might blow
We know how the
up.
war ended.
Yeah, who might give up the goods on Operation Overlord and the invasion at Normandy. Yeah, we kind of know how it's going to end up, right? It's engaging, but yeah, of course it can be predictable at times, which could reduce the overall suspense for the viewers if they can anticipate the twists and turns or what might happen next too often. So this might have some merit, but I think there are plenty of times where you're not going to guess what might happen next.
Right.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. D-Day happened where the Allies wanted it, so you kind of know the ending. And since it's based on the events that happened during the planning and deception phase of D-Day, there's some historical context here that we all know. We know the end game. So you have to suspend your knowledge for the ultimate end and see what happens and what unfolds in this story.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's all true, right? All right, let's look at the lack of emotional engagement. What?
Who's saying that?
There are critics who feel that the film lacks emotional depth and therefore does not fully engage the audience on an emotional level, making it harder to connect with the characters. I find when it is difficult to connect.
I don't get this one, Dan.
I find when it's difficult to connect with characters on screen, and then yeah, I don't care about what happens to them. But here, I think we know what we want to happen to the Needle. We do not know all of what will happen with the other characters, so we might feel connected. But this is one of the most difficult things to do in a movie: connect truly with the character, which when it happens, it's a result of excellent writing, great dialogue, superb acting, and a cinematographic experience that enhances the mood and the feeling of the scenes throughout the movie. This movie has it.
This critique blows my mind because if you look at Lucy and Faber,
Yeah.
there is a lot of emotional engagement between those two, especially if you think about how when they hop in bed the first time, And then if you look at how Lucy, her face is the second time they're in bed, when she knows more than she knew the first time about this Faber guy, and she can't let him know, that says it all. And that, I mean,
Yeah, she's
that
good.
is emotional engagement.
Yeah, I don't get it. So we're gonna dismiss that one.
Yeah. Next, let's move on to the next one. Simplistic character development. So, well, Faber is complex and developed that way. Other characters, such as Lucy's husband, are seen as more one-dimensional, which can detract from the overall depth of the story. Well, we think the character development is the strength of this movie. In an hour and 52 minutes, can you develop each and every character to the same depth? No.
No.
You've got to choose. And we think that the writers and the directors chose wisely. And I'll use David as the example here, the husband.
Yeah.
Lucy's husband. You get what you need to know about him from a development perspective. There's no reason to carry on about this guy. He was going to be a pilot in the RAF. He lost his legs. He's having emotional problems with that fact, but he still has mind, and he uses it in part of this.
You know, David was multidimensional before he lost his legs. He became one-dimensional when he did lose his legs. I think he actually did a good job of that, and that was pretty clear.
You have a guy who was very frustrated with his predicament in life.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, graphic violence, number 5. Yeah, there's graphic violence. There is violence in this movie, and we see the violence. If you don't like to see violence in movies, then move on. Skip this movie. There are a number of sudden, scary, and graphic acts of violence, which might be off-putting to some viewers who prefer less graphic content. If you're looking for an Alfred Hitchcock shower scene from Psycho and that kind of imagine it in your head violence, then you'll not find that here. And hey, some people just do not want to see this. So fair enough. If you don't like graphic violence,
totally disagree with you on this one, Dan. And it's because I don't think it's graphic.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there is blood. I don't think it's graphic. It's not excessive. In one scene, a character gets part of their hand chopped off with an axe.
Yeah.
They spared the gory details on this.
Didn't you cringe?
You knew it was chopped off. You saw the hand wrapped up and bleeding later. Yeah, but it's not, I don't think that's really graphic. I mean, this is an R-rated movie.
Yeah,
it's not going to be like,
you see the knives going
I stab
in,
you with a knife and go like that, and then they cut
right.
to the next thing.
We'll let everyone decide.
Yeah.
Decide for yourself.
There is blood. I'll give you that.
Yeah, there's blood. All right, let's look at another critique, romantic subplot. Okay, yeah. A lot of spy movies have a romantic subplot as part of the movie, part of the story. And I know Tom oftentimes finds this distracting. In 3 Days of the Condor, a recent podcast episode we found that the on-screen relationship development between Robert Redford's character, Condor, or Joseph Turner, and Faye Dunaway's character, Kathy Hale, seemed a bit forced and inconsistent. Here, the romantic subplot between Faber and Lucy has been criticized for feeling forced and unconvincing, which can be distracting. It does happen quickly, and there is some truth, I think, to this criticism.
And you and I are on opposite pages again on this one, Dan. Because
okay, all right.
Earlier, I don't think her giving in was forced, or it didn't seem forced to me. You know, you've got a person who is as lonely as she was, who's neglected by her husband. In the situation they were in, I can totally see that happening, and happening quickly, because they don't want David to find out.
And they don't have a lot of time, actually, right? Because he's going to be leaving anytime soon.
Yeah.
Any
so,
moment.
I mean, to me, I don't think it was forced, and it was too quick. I thought it made sense given her situation.
All right, limited action scenes. Yeah, number 7 here. Yeah, that's true. If you're looking for lots of action scenes, not the movie for you. This is more espionage, story, and character development. There are relatively few action scenes. So again, if you're looking for more physical confrontations, chases, shootouts, explosions, no, move on.
Well, but the action scenes weren't needed. This wasn't a story about action. It's about espionage, the war from the extremities, not the front lines, and Faber's escape. Action wasn't needed here.
I agree. I don't think the action was needed here. I think they told a story and they did it well. And let's look at another criticism in number 8, an atmospheric overload, the kind of stuff we've just been praising.
Yeah, we've been praising the atmospheric
for
stuff.
the whole thing. Some people find that not so good, that it was over the top.
Those people would be wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. Move on. It's a positive for the movie. When Faber gets onto Storm Island, it has to be bleak because it's
Well,
going
and
to be.
that whole bleak atmosphere, things worked before. Look at The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Funeral in Berlin. I mean, even The 39 Steps,
Yeah.
all great spy movies, but bleak. Because sometimes the bleakness and the isolation is part of the story.
There you go. So that critique is blown out of the water, sir. All right, there are lots of strengths to Eye of the Needle, but always some critiques and valid ones as well. How many perfect movies are there, really? Maybe From Russia with Love and Goldfinger and Casablanca. But other than that, how many perfect movies are there?
Oh,
Come on.
overall, Eye of the Needle is appreciated for its strong performances, especially by Donald Sutherland, and its suspenseful narrative. And Dan and I, we recommend Eye of the Needle.
We do. And so that is a wrap. This has been Dan
And Tom.
of SpyMovieNavigator.com on our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Subscribe to our show and our YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you spending time with us. Thanks.